Dear friends, welcome to Kasparovchess, and I'm so glad to conduct this live interview with Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. My name is Almira Skripchenko. Maxime,
Hi, Almira. Hi, everyone.
Maxime, I wanted to ask you, you're known in the chess world as MVL, and this is sort of a superhero name.
Yeah, once my captain in my English chess team, English chess club, told me that MVL was, could be found in Marvel comics, like in the name. So maybe it is, but I never felt like a superhero.
But
Just a regular chess player.
but if you could choose like a superpower, which one would you choose?
Mm. I once answered that I would love to be invisible, but maybe I would love to fly instead.
Oh, it's a nice quality. So Maxime just came from the candidates tournament, and this was such a historic event. First of all, it would be such a nice story to tell your grandkids. Yes, Maxime. Okay, I was 29 when the tournament has started. Yes, and then abruptly it was stopped, and then I turned 30, and the tournament resumed. So please, can you tell me something about like your first feelings when the tournament started, because it was your first participation in the candidates?
Yeah, I was very excited to be taking part in the candidates. I learned it, of course, only a few days before it began, but my team and I, we took every necessary step so that I would be ready and ready to fight. So I felt ready. I also felt that there was, of course, always a risk of the tournament to be interrupted because of the COVID situation, and it turned out to be the case because borders in Russia were closed. And yeah, at the end of the day, it was not even the weight that was difficult to to take care of, because I knew that once the tournament would resume,
There is a risk.
I would be ready. I would be ready for the resumption. I would be ready chess-wise, psychologically wise, and so on. But the tournaments in between, with the candidates in the back of my mind, because I was, of course, in the shared lead, these tournaments were difficult to play with, they felt like not very important compared to, the candidates. So this was, I tried, of course, to play the best I could, but I couldn't manage until the candidates resumed.
So this, like in musical terms, this was such a long intermission, and like year later, you came back to the same city, Yekaterinburg, and I remember the interview which was given by Fabiano Caruana, who said that this felt completely surreal. So what were your feelings then?
I don't know about surreal. I was just, I was actually glad to be back in the same city and same place, same hotel, so that I could really re-envision exactly what happened a year ago. At least it made it feel like there was no like big pause between the events.
It's a sort of continuum.
Yeah, exactly, a continuum. So in general, yeah, I was glad to come back. I arrived a few days early with my second Sebastian.
Yes, this is actually the difference between the first half of the tournament and the second half of the tournament, that you, like a year ago, you were there alone, and this time you were accompanied by your second and also by your friend. So did it help you?
Yeah, I think it helped me, especially when things didn't go well at the resumption. It's so easy when things don't go your way to actually sort of, collapse and not manage to recover. But here you have people to push you forward and
To motivate you.
I didn't need motivation, but to help you remember that I can be a decent chess player and that I can play my best chess, even if things hadn't been going my way before that. So this helped tremendously. And actually, in the first, for the first half of the tournament, I tried to bring Sébastien, but it was not possible to organize. There were very few days, and I think we had managed more or less to get all the papers so that he could get the visas, but it turned out to be logistically impossible for him to come.
Yes, we have adapted to our new reality since then. So you finished the first half of the tournament. I just wanted to remind our viewers that you were co-leading the tournament after the first half together with Jan Nepomniachtchi. And actually, that's the position that you have on the board. It's from your last game in the first half that you played against Jan. And you won this game. So this is one of the key moments of the game. So let's analyze it.
Yeah, this game against Jan was tremendously important. Of course, at the time we played that game, we didn't know the tournament would be interrupted, but still, Jan was 1 point ahead of me. I think, I'm not completely sure whether I was in clear second place or shared, but anyway, everyone was 1 point away from Jan, and for instance, if Jan wins this game, he's 2 points ahead by the 7th round. With 7 games to go, it's a huge lead. So at the same time, I cannot afford him an easy draw. I'm white, and to give him 1 point, a 1 point advantage would be too much. So I definitely had to press for a win. Surprisingly, he chose win-over variation, which he had chosen already against Kirill Alexeyenko.
So he has chosen the French variation against the Frenchman, yes?
Yeah, and I say surprisingly, but of course, when you go into a candidates tournament, generally you prepare. It's common strategy to prepare only one opening, but it's a risky opening, and it was very easy to foresee that I would be well prepared for it. Especially, I think we had a free day before that game, but Jan was confident he could get good chances. So here we have this position, which is typical from a win-hour. One thing to note is black actually cannot castle his king, and also his rook moved earlier in the game.
So it's very unusual to have these pieces back to their initial position.
Also, it's quite unusual because in a normal win-hour, you have this pawn on c2 and this pawn on b6, for instance. Here it changes a few things. And I did manage to get a4, a3, a4, and the next 2 moves generally when you play a4 is bishop c1, bishop a3, and you get this this nice diagonal for your bishop, and you get the attack. And it's actually a pretty good move. But here my position felt so good because black's king is pretty safe for now, but it's doomed to stay in the center, and whenever I break on the king side with f4, f5, my position gets very strong, and his king gets very weak. And I decided to go rook b4. So this challenges the queen side a bit. For instance, after rook fb1, potential rook b5, or maybe no, bishop c1, bishop a3, I can get a tremendous advantage. So Jan decided to react with knight c6. And of course, now you can wonder why I played rook b4. Well, knight c6, it's not clear this move is useful because, again, after f4, now I threaten directly f5. But the rook is threatened, and this was my point, that I didn't need to defend it. So my first intuition was to go rook fb1. And now, after knight takes b4, pawn takes, queen a6, b5, queen c8, and something like bishop b4, I have a tremendous initiative. Black's king probably has to go to the queen side for safety. And in general, his pieces, Jan's pieces, are not working very well. The knight on d7 is not doing anything. All the fires are closed also, so the rooks are definitely not stronger than the bishop. It's probably the opposite. And after something like knight c3 and then a5, black's position could collapse. But my general intuition was that anyway, Jan wouldn't take the exchange here because, maybe he didn't foresee the exchange sacrifice, but I expected that even if he didn't, once I play my move, he will realize it's too dangerous to take it. And so I realized I don't need rook fb1. And I thought, why not play f4 right away and take advantage of the fact that the knight is not on e7 anymore. Take advantage of the fact that after knight takes before pawn takes, I mean, queen a6 would be the same story, as I mentioned, but after rook takes before, there would be queen c3, very important, and the rook is pinned, and black loses a piece. So actually after f4, I mean, it was like a good move because it makes me win some tempi, but at the same time it was a bit risky because now Jan has a defensive idea. He goes back to e7, and after rook b1, he goes f5. And now the difference is he couldn't play f5 before because after pawn takes, knight takes. With my pawn on f2, I would have knight f4. Here it's different. With a pawn on f4, square on e4 is very much...
rather weak.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good spot for black's knight. Even pawn takes is also interesting now that the pawn is on f4. Even though then there might be f5 at some point. So anyway, after f5, it's clear that I cannot really take on f6 anymore, and I have to find another idea. So I played rook b5, queen a6, bishop c1. So now I bring my bishop back, and now my idea will be to actually break through with g4. And of course, for me to break through with g4, I need to be able to take the knight on e7, because otherwise the knight will come to f5, and that's not what I want. So anyway, king f7, bishop a3, rook b8. And that's why I meant that it was a bit risky. So it's that I'm just in time, but it was not clear that I would be in time. So and now, so Jan took. Of course, you cannot really take, like, I can play queen g6, I can even play something like f5, take, and now rook f1. This looks also tremendously dangerous.
But Maxime, I just have one question. When a player of your caliber say, I can play this, but during the game, what was your intention? It's just you would wait for your opponent's move and then you would decide like how to continue?
Oh, in general, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to play against my opponent's answer. But there's always, you take some time after your opponent moves, either because he played something you didn't really expect, or at least was not your main focus, or because you want to recheck, to be certain of what you saw previously. But of course, generally, the position that comes over the board is generally something you've predicted for a few moves, and it's not always the case. It's not even like 90% of the cases, but it's a pretty good 60-70% that the position you get on the board is something you've envisioned already. So anyway, Jan takes, and now, well, after pawn takes, rook takes, queen takes, here was Jan's last chance. I think, yeah, he took on f5, and after knight g3, knight takes f5, next move I could convert quite easily. But there was a good defensive try, which was queen b6. And actually, here would have been a good moment to pause because I had this position on my mind. And I was planning f6, which looks like it's crashing through because the pawn on h6 is so dangerous. But actually here, after king e8, and if you go, for instance, queen takes h6, well, actually, no, you don't go queen takes h6 because of some perpetual. Well, you go king f2. So for some, to be precise, like otherwise there's queen b1.
Yes, because the queen on h7 controls the b1
square. But no, black takes on e5, plays knight to f8, I take on h6, and now comes queen b1. And suddenly my pawn on h5 is not so strong anymore. Like the square on h7 is covered, and you have to remember this a pawn wins actually quite fast because my pieces are not in the way of preventing this pawn to get promoted. So actually, I think we missed this. We both missed this idea of knight f8, that would be a good defensive try.
Yeah, this is such a beautiful defensive resource.
Yeah, in general, defensive resources are something that's very difficult to spot. I mean, we improved a lot as chess players in terms of finding defensive resources, but it's obviously much more difficult than finding natural moves in attack. So here we come back to queen b6. If I try to go queen c2 to protect the f5 pawn, then comes queen b3, and it's same story. So here the question is actually whether I would have been able to find the move queen a1, which would have been, to be fair, like a move I would have considered for sure. And after pawn takes, you go on knight g3, king e6, and I think queen a3 is very strong here because now the queen on b6 is stuck to the protection of the d6 square, which means that you don't have any sort of counterplay like queen b1, king g2, queen c2, king h3. Then next is queen d6. And this way I gradually take over. Like you can put the pawn on a5, but you can do no more. So this would have won as well, but I would have needed to refrain from the impulsive and very tempting f6 check.
So Black would have found himself like gradually in sort of Zugzwang in this position, like after queen a3, king d6, a5.
Yeah, well, here I would say that it's just gradually winning. Like I can do many things. I can bring, for instance, my knight to e3, which would be a good idea to eye on the d5 square. And then the question is whether I can go at some point like queen a2, queen g2. Like I don't think I need necessarily a Zugzwang. Maybe I do actually. Maybe I need to force Black's queen to go to a6, and then I have time for queen a2, queen g2. I don't know, but in general, it's anyway clear it's gonna. I mean, Black's position is gonna collapse at some point because there's too many weaknesses and not enough room for his pieces, and his pieces cannot move, especially the knight on d7. The queen on b6 is stuck to the protection of d6. The pawn can move to a4, but that's it. So there's no counterplay, and clearly this would have won for me.
Yeah. And should we like have a look at the end of the game, or we'll stop here?
Yeah.
I think this is quite decisive,
Yes.
of course. So that was the last game of the first half. You came back to Ekaterinburg, and I think the most difficult part, like of the second half, is that you had to start with two blacks. I think people forget that how difficult it is, and especially your first game against Fabiano Caruana was very difficult. And what a game! It reminded me of the games masters played like in romantic period of chess. Maxime, actually, my first question is, I'm asking yourself these unpleasant questions. How did you feel when you had the novelty on the board physically? Did you feel like the world is crumbling? Yes, let's have the position on the board.
Yeah. No, in general, I was like absolutely ready to face any sort of unpleasant surprise because, well, I knew that Fabiano, with the help of Rustam, is a very dangerous theoretical opponent, and well, he definitely could uncork something special.
Yes, Fabiano used the novelty which they had in store for quite a while, which was found by Rustam Kasimdzhanov, his second.
Yes, so he was like a position that was played in correspondence chess. And yeah, in general, they were playing something like bishop d6, take, and knight b5. And here there are many moves for black. One of them, I mean, I don't remember which one is strongest. This was actually my plan during the game. I mean, I lose one bishop, like knight takes, pawn takes. Might be slightly more pleasant for white, but of course I have a rook, a knight, and 3 pawns for the queen, and that's, materially speaking, at least enough to achieve a draw at some points. Like, of course, there's some attack. The knight on d6 is very unpleasant, but shouldn't be too difficult to hang on. And also, like, the surprise value is non-existent in this position. So I didn't know what to expect, but I didn't really expect bishop d6 to happen. I expected some sort of firework, but I didn't know which one, and came bishop c4. And after queen takes c4, bishop d6. So here I'm on the board, and yeah, so basically I'm a bishop and 3 pawns up, but I realize that there's no way I can get this bishop out of the game. The immediate threat is bishop takes c5, knight takes, knight d6, and so the question is, how am I gonna castle? Well, there's no way. So I had a look at a few options. I briefly considered bishop a7 or bishop b6, and I discarded it on account of something like bishop a3. I mean, I expected there would be some line in which I'm holding, but like I looked, for instance, bishop c7, knight f5 already, knight d6 check is next, if pawn takes, knight f6 is mate, next move. So I immediately...
you dismissed it.
Yeah, I dismissed bishop b6. Bishop takes d4 as well. I mean, again, this bishop on d4, on d6 is too dangerous. And actually, what's even more dangerous than the bishop on d6 is a knight on e4, ready to jump on d6 instead of the bishop. So there were my two main continuations. So my first intuition was actually the move I played in the game, knight f6, and which was an unpleasant surprise to Fabiano, who didn't expect me to find this move. To be honest, it felt extremely natural to just force knight takes c5. So it's good that you can force your opponent's move. Like, I mean, if you can see you're not losing by force, you're keeping a decent positions, and you keep the position rather simple in terms of continuations. Like, I knew that after knight d5, queen e5 would be the only move, and then I can think. So I have two only moves for white. It's much better than having to, work through a sea of options. And then before I play it immediately, of course, and because I knew this wouldn't be the end of the line, otherwise it's pretty... I mean, I expected, of course, the line to be much more venomous than, having to find knight f6, knight d5. I expected to have another few good moves to find. So there was f5, which was interesting. And I dismissed it for valid, but, I had much... there was a much better reason to discard it, and I could have discarded it much faster. So knight takes c5. And here, well, king f7 is the move, but it's not natural. It's possible to find, of course, but then there can come some castle, knight takes f5, I don't know. I mean, clearly this was not the way I was going to play the game. And after knight takes c5, knight takes f5. So my intention, I mean, here you lose with black. My intention was queen e4. And here, well, I was concerned after knight takes g7, king f7 with bishop takes c5, which is actually pretty strong for white. But, well, the thing is, it's totally useless because after castle, king g7, queen g3 just mate. So I did lose like a good 5 to 10 minutes in this position, but I mean, you're always gonna lose some time in these positions, and of course, I think I took over half an hour to decide on knight f6, but it was a justified half an hour. So I did go knight f6, and yeah, I mean, I was praised for this move, but it seemed like the only reasonable move to play, to be honest. And here is actually the move that I thought was much more difficult to find, because my first intuition would be queen takes e3. And here I remember looking at king e2 and king f2. I think I finally decided that king f2 was stronger, and that was actually the case. And in general, I couldn't find a way to get away, because after knight f6, I think this was actually very strong. Knight g4 and king to g1. I mean, I'm talking from memory here, but and here some yes, here this wins a piece already. Like could be made somewhere, but a piece is enough to make you stop your calculations. So of course here, I mean, one thing that's very useful with my queen on c4 is that it prevents castling. So I thought I might as well keep it here for now. And again, so now I have to prevent queen takes g7, if f6, queen h5. So the only reasonable move for me is rook g8. And here again, what's good is that it forces white's options, like knight f5 doesn't work because now queen c3 exchanging queen. So now you have to do something and to take on e6. Pawn takes, knight takes. And here's the only moment where I had an option but didn't think about it. Move knight f6 is actually very, very strong. Like, well, if you see so that you do not need to
play your king in this position.
No, but there are a few moves that are annoying. So knight g7, king f7, rook f1 is one of them. And here, take, you play knight c6, you prevent queen e7 check, and you get the knight back. And probably I'm slightly better. But yeah, I didn't even consider this move knight f6, also because of the flurry of discovered checked. Knight d8 check is looking very dangerous. King takes d8, bishop c7 is mate. And here, well, I'm not even sure what's good for me, but I'm assuming it's something like bishop e6, knight e6, and now along the lines of knight c6, and you attack the queen, and somehow I'm gonna develop, I'm gonna get away with a pawn up, and now my pieces will coordinate, and I might just win. But during the game, I saw I could just exchange queens and be a piece and 2 pawns up. Of course, I'm losing the rook, so here I didn't consider rook a7, which could have been the most practical. But I went knight c4. I thought, and here was maybe my first and bigger mistake of the game, is to think that my trouble was over, that I'm an exchange down, but I have 2 pawns. But gradually Fabiano took over, and as I was not the most precise, and in general this position was not so easy to defend, as easy to defend as I thought, because my 2 pawns are not advancing quite easily. And well, after a few adventures, we went to this theoretical endgame that's been talked about. So let's move to that.
Maxime, do you know that while you were playing this endgame, like all the servers with table bases, they crashed?
Yeah.
Because this shows actually that chess has experienced such a boom nowadays. That like
yeah,
the whole world
everyone wanted
to know.
the answer.
Yes,
yeah,
they wanted to know.
Yeah,
yes.
well, it's so bad that you don't have the answer ready for you. So here's the position, and basically, so when I went into this endgame, I thought it would be a much easier draw than it actually was, because I was blindfolded by the fact that with a pawn on g4 it's an easy draw. You just put your knight to g5, it's over. But here with the pawn on g2, I had to find the correct setup, and this was not so easy. So first, of course, if you bring your knight to g5, this doesn't work, because here you're in Zugzwang, and if it's white to move, you play rook g4, and then you get king f5. So it's very important that to find the right square for my knight. And in general, I thought the squares that would cover the most squares would be h6 and g7. So this is how far I got. And I didn't like to go to g7 because of something along the lines of pawn to g4, rook to e7, king to f4. And here what I realized is my knight cannot really move. And for instance, after king e4, I cannot even play f5. So this would be bad news. But what I didn't realize is that I could just move my king from h6 to g6. And the knight is taking so many entry squares, the pawn as well for the king. And once the king takes so much time to run to d6, let's say now f5 is good enough for a draw. And well, g5 is no use. You have f4, you have knight h5. This is an easy draw. But of course, during the game, you don't want to be like, I mean, I knew I was going to have a passive defense, but you don't want to be so passive as you have only your kings that can move. And I decided that I could bring my knight to h6. And in general, what I envisioned is, well, the difference with the pawn on g2 is you can at least go rook g3 check, and I was getting this position, and here I thought it's some sort of zugzwang. So I was not sure whether if it's my move, I can hold it with black. I actually didn't see how I could hold it. But with white, it was also very difficult to make progress and to lose the tempo. But Fabiano found a brilliant way. I mean, took him some time. But
well, he reshuffled the pieces all the time, so he actually, in some way, he made you crack under the pressure because you had to take so many difficult decisions during this game.
Yeah, and also what happened is once I brought my knight to h6, I didn't look back twice. I didn't try to see if I should bring it to g7. I just assumed it would be a draw, and there was this nice moment which, like a few moves later, yes, here, exactly. And here is where Fabiano found the right setup. So first, he goes rook h3. Now if I go knight e7, he goes rook h7, forces king e6. And no, it's very important that my king is not on g6. When his king runs to h5, it's an easy win. So after rook h3, I go king g6. Now he goes rook a3. So I go king f7, because if I go knight h6, for instance, rook g3 check, king f7, king f4, and we're back to the zugzwang position, mutual zugzwang position it turns out. So king f7 was played, and now king f4. And here, well, the problem is I play knight h6, which runs into rook g3, and after knight to e7, well, there would be rook a7 that would win. So, like, I could have played something else somewhere, but in general, like, I think here I could have played knight to e7, but there rook a5 would have won. In general, it was great because now if knight g8, king d5, and the king runs to e6, so it's always a question on whether you can bring your king up, like, and I mean, penetrate black's defensive setup. Yeah. I mean, once the king is on e6, it's a matter of time because before the pawn is connected. And if you go king f7, it's the same story. So you go rook a7, and now the king is stuck on e6, and you have time to bring your king to the king side, and you win. But yeah, it was not obvious to sense all these subtleties, but of course, I should. I mean, I feel like I should have been able to find that. I should have gone to g7. Of course, if I could have seen that the knight on h6 would lose, maybe I would lose. I mean, I would bring my knight to g7 through elimination. But yeah, the difficult part was that knight h6 was such a tempting defense.
Yeah, this was such an incredible game. I remember while we were commentating it live, that's like after the game, it was the longest game also of the tournament, and then my brain was on fire. I cannot even imagine your state, you know, when you had to take all these difficult decisions. Of course, it's your job, but nevertheless, I think that it shows how many variations do you see, you know, during the game.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm ready whenever I come to a tournament, especially to the candidates, to be faced with difficult questions and to to exercise my brain properly to find variations. It's not an easy job, but it's also what I'm playing for. So, I definitely don't complain of having to find too many variations.
So that was actually a crucial game for you and for FIDE, who caught you. And like after this game, both of you shared the second place, but you were still in the race. And I think one of the most important games, like besides your game against Yan Nepomniachtchi Black, was the game against Kirill Alexeyenko, where you played a very interesting opening. Like it's a rare guest, I think, on such high level.
Yeah, to be fair, like the day before, I mean, we had a free. No, we didn't even have a free day, but the day before I lost.
Against Alexander Gershik.
Yeah, and that was a crucial game against Sasha because we both were playing artillery for a win, at least in terms of opening options and so on. So we wanted a fight, but I got in big trouble, tried to fight back, and then at some point when I fought back, I didn't take the draw and tried to play on too much for a win, and it badly backfired. But I don't really regret that decision because Jan was already 1 point ahead, and things that I would play him with black, I mean, I had to try to cut the lead at some point. So
yeah, this is a very much calculated risk.
Yeah. So. But anyway, yes, this game against Sasha took me back to 50%, and the next day I was playing Kirill, and this was a very important game to help me, at least fight back and,
Oh, and keep your chances.
Yeah, keep my chances. Yeah, I had to win the last 3 games, so I didn't realistically think that I would win all 3 games. But of course, I was going to fight for it, and this started with a win in the first game.
Yes, I'll have to. I'll have to. This is like one of those moments where I would destroy the whole studio, but
Yeah.
which make the teaser.
So anyway, yeah. So I had to win this game, and of course to also gain back some confidence, because of course I had lots of very tough battles, and I needed to have something go my way, because definitely nothing had been going my way. I also had a very interesting game with Anish, where I felt like I had the upper end for most of the games and didn't manage to win. So that actually was the game that forced me to play so aggressively with Sasha and so on. But here I just thought, okay, like I'm like 1% going to win the candidates. Let's not think about winning the candidates. Let's just think about enjoying playing the candidates, enjoying playing fighting games, and win a game. Yeah, basically. Yeah. That's how I looked at it. And Kirill surprised me on the very first move. I mean, I know he plays some Caro-Kann, but generally I expected him to play e5 and some Rui Lopez action. So I went d4, d5, and here, well, I almost forgot that f3 was our intention. Like, of course, there are many options, but f3 is getting some popularity back. I mean, it was always very popular online and in Blitz in general, but it wasn't played in serious classical games for a while. I mean, only occasionally. But now it's getting some traction back. Kirill surprised me. It took very quickly, e5, knight f3, bishop g4, c3, and this is, I feel like it's a very dangerous variation. And for instance, here he played knight f6, which is already a pretty big inaccuracy. And it shows you how dangerous a variation is, like how difficult it is to play if a natural move like a knight f6 attacking the pawn on e4 could be a serious inaccuracy. But here knight d7 is necessary, so that bishop c4 is no no longer a danger. I think bishop e7 is just fine here. But after knight f6, well, the idea of knight f6 over knight d7 is that I cannot play bishop d3 as was played by Caruana in Norway chess, I think, against Firoja. But no, bishop c4 is powerful, and I threaten queen b3, which attacks the pawn on f7. So, like, for instance, Q will realize that knight d7, queen b3, bishop h5, and here something like knight g5 is very good for me. Knight takes c4 is not an option because of this very typical sacrifice. Check, I win back the bishop on g4, it's just over. Here's the only good move would have been bishop h5, but you're losing one tempo, so clearly it's not ideal. So Kirill thought he will at least not lose the tempo with queen c7. Which looks like a good move, but actually what happened is that, you know, in one of my few moments of brightness, I mean, like when I'm working from home, I actually looked at the position of the queen c7 and I started to click on the computer. And even if I couldn't remember it during the game, like the exact variation, once I saw the option, it clicked in my brain that it was going to be very strong. So first I take on e5. And of course, I went into bishop f3, queen e5. And now you threaten the pawn on e4. And here's the point of my play is that I go bishop f4. Now Kirill played queen h5 after a long thought, but it's clearly like now I have two bishops, lots of activity, and well, black's king is in the center. The pawn on f7 is always very weak. I mean, it's much better for me. We'll come back to the game at some point. But of course, what happens after queen takes e4 is a question. But now I take, and this very important thing is both files are open, and the king is simply not in time, so to castle. I mean, so knight d2 is my move, and here, for instance, if you take on d2, king takes, rook e1 is next. After bishop e7, rook e1, you cannot castle because of the bishop on e7, and it's basically game over.
This is such a beautiful idea. When we saw it during our analysis, we understood like how deep was your preparation.
Yeah, no, it's very nice that you're in the endgame, you're pawn down, you haven't really castled yet, but somehow in two moves you're all castled, all ready to attack the black king, and it's just not in time. And after knight d6 is the same story. You don't need your bishop here, so you just castle, and after knight takes, it's the same story. Rook e1 is next, and yeah, it's. I mean, there was some sort of defensive line where you don't lose on the spot, but there's. I mean, there's no way you find this, and even if you find it, you're seriously worse. So. So Kirill chose the lesser evil with queen h5, and I mean the game moved on, and we got into an endgame. Kirill gave up a pawn at some point to actually sort of make it less difficult to defend and maybe get some counterplay, which it did on the queen side. So anyway, we got to this position. Just get away with the pieces.
Yeah, this is a very instructive moment of the game.
Yeah, so here we have this position, and of course I can move around with my pieces, but I thought let's find something concrete, let's find something decisive. So let's see what happens if I exchange the rooks. And of course, I was not exactly in my most confident shape. I had just lost a game. I didn't win a game. Like I won one game in 2021, and it was not a good one. But I thought I should be able to work this out anyway. I can play many other moves, but the question is basically whether I can break through black's fortress, because the king on e6 is difficult to move away. of course, there's a weakness on c5, which will be useful. And we'll see what we can do on the queen side, but normally we cannot do much. If a3, b3, then the pawn on b2 is weak. If b3, simply a3. So actually, yes, I even decided to bring my king to c2 first, so to be sure that the pawn would go to a3. Then I thought I'll move my king to g4 to force h5, bring my king back. And there I assumed it would be some kind of Zugzwang, and it is. Basically, that's what happened in the game. So, I mean, he will move these pieces because this king on a6 cannot move. So, just move these pieces. So, bishop f8, king c2, bishop e7. I'm not sure how it goes. It's not very important. I bring my bishop to f2. This is quite important to have bishop h4. Also, bishop h4 is a threat. Even more so than f5, because then the king on e5 could get some counterplay. So anyway, h5 comes, king f3, and here's the position where the first Zugzwang, basically. So either you move your king, in which case I'll just bring my king here, this way, or you move your bishop, and now my bishop comes to h4. So this is what happened. Now again, like if you go bishop d6, comes e5 and king e4. I think that's what Kirill played. If you wait with bishop h6, anyway comes e5, because after king f5, bishop e7 would win, normally speaking. So yeah, anyway, there was not much to do. So I went to c7, and now again, it's not so easy to find out what to do from afar. But I saw that I had this idea to go bishop g5, now bishop h6, and bishop f8, and finally, it's the Zugzwang will soon be complete. So like bishop to d6, h3, the king cannot move, and after bishop a7, bishop c7. Like I think I even thought the pawn on h4 was better for this. So let's say I play h4, king d7. Here I must say there's very nice way to finish the game. It's bishop a5, king e6. Yeah, no, I thought bishop d8, king d7. No, there's no, like, okay, so where I planned to finish was actually the easiest. So I go king d5, king e6. No, I threatened king f7, e6, e7, so I gave up that bishop. But now the only way to prevent the promotion is with bishop b8, to play bishop d6. But anyway, the bishop comes back into the game, but is stuck because of this pawn. So I just take this pawn, take this one, bring my king back, and push my pawn, and just win by force. Like you can play something like this. Now king g7. At some point, anyway, you have to take care of the h pawn, but it's too late. It's like king d7, pawn wins and wins.
No, this was actually a very instructive, beautiful ending. So this game was very important, but then unfortunately you didn't manage to beat Jan with black pieces, which is a difficult task, of course. Just try yourself to beat a player of such caliber.
Yeah, well, no, the question is like the bad luck in the sense that Jan won that game against Huang Gao with black, and this gave him half-point leads and even a three-quarters point lead over Anish Giri, because he had won, he was winning on tiebreaks against Anish, which meant that the realistic thing he would do would be to play for a draw against me, and then hope that Anish wouldn't get 1 point more than him in the last two games. And this would eliminate me from the race. If he had not won that game against Huang Gao, I would have played differently, because I would have felt it's on him also to play for a win, and this might give me more chances to play for a win. Here I had to uncork something, and well, it could have backfired, but actually Jan was feeling pretty nervous during the game and maybe chose the most solid options instead of the most challenging. And in general, I managed to gradually get some counterplay, but never enough pose serious problems. I mean, any problem I solved, Jan managed to solve them, and in general, he was deserved winner of the candidates. So congratulations to him.
Thank you, Maxime. You also finished on a very like the second place. You know, you might say you will not remember it, but I think it's such an important result. You also won your last game against Van Hao. You improved on the game in the Berlin defense. So what experience did you gain? What would you do differently maybe after this tournament? Because you certainly will try to qualify for the next candidates. So.
Yeah, no, in general, it was a great experience. And I mean, once I couldn't fight for first place anymore, I mean, I was fighting for second place. So, of course, I'm happy to have gotten it at least. But, I mean, this is not what you fight for when you go to the candidates. So, in general, I was happy with the experience I got. I was happy with the work I put in with my whole team, and to make sure I was well prepared. So yeah, I mean, of course, I looked back at it with my team to see what we could have done differently, what was working well, and it's a work in progress. First step would be to qualify for the candidates and to be certain that, you know, that I get all my chances next time around. But in general, it's very hard to say that, you know, like just one event, no matter how well you prepared for it, it's not a given that you're gonna play well, and this is what happened to me. I was not playing well, yeah, this is something you cannot really control, whether you're playing well or not. So I'm glad to have at least fought back, to have played well in the first half, of course, by the end of the second half as well. And so yeah, it's difficult to reach any definitive conclusions, but clearly I'm gonna learn a lot from the games I played, from the experience I got, and maybe next time I get a chance, maybe I'll get to win it. I mean, at least that's what I'll be fighting for. Well,
it's like you've got a dream. So I still have one last question, but before I wanted to invite our viewers to have a look at the documentary which we shot like almost 2 years ago in 2019. It's a documentary about Maxime, which shows him like in a more intimate way. At least that's what we try to portray. So you might find a secret or two in this documentary. It's also portrays chess in a very poetic way. But one interesting fact about this document is that your peers and even Garry Kasparov, they talk about you, you know. So, and one thing which the answers had in common is that they consider that that's your strengths, you know, that you always play your pet openings as Grunfeld and Najdorf, and you know these positions so well, you feel them. But they also consider that this is your Achilles heel, you know, so it's also your weakness. So that would be easy to prepare for you, and as it happened in your game against Fabiano Caruana, so you were trapped in the opening. So will you stick to your guns once again?
Well, it's, you know, every situation is different, of course. Like I discussed with Etienne primarily before the candidates to think about our options, because we had lots of time to decide on which openings I would play. We decided to stick with it. We didn't see any serious reason not to. I don't think I lost to Fabiano because of the opening. I mean, I managed to find the moves. I had a very decent position, and you know, sometimes it also, I mean, once you navigate the positions quite well and much better than other types of position, and maybe better than your opponents, then it gives you also some winning chances. I mean, it was not the case here, but could easily have been. So of course, like it's not like I cannot play any other opening. I mean, I have played those openings recently. I've been getting a feel with them, but yeah, in general, it's clear that Najdorf and Grunfeld are the two openings I master the best. But you know, depending on the situation, like next year, like there's a possibility that Naidov is busted next year. I mean, clearly it's not going to happen, but there's always this remote possibility that something changes, and there are some openings that are not played anymore today that were popular 5 years ago. Maybe it will be the case next year. So I don't know. Like, there's no obvious answer to this question.
Thank you so much, Maxime. So, as I understood, Fabiano and Anish, watch out. Naidov is going to be played for years now. Thank you so much for this interview, Maxime. And we just hope to see you more during the tournaments over the board pretty soon, yes?
Yeah, pretty soon. We'll have the Grand Chess Tour coming back soon. So I'll be playing in Bucharest early June.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.